Welcome to the Happiness Hour, a podcast where we explore the many facets of happiness and what it truly means to live a fulfilling life. I'm your host, Lena, and today we're going to dive deep into the topic of happiness, what it is, how we can find it, and what we can do to live a happier life every day. I'm thrilled to be joined by a special guest today, Patrick, who is a psychologist. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thanks for having me, Lena. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited to talk about happiness today. It's something we all strive for, but it can sometimes feel elusive, right? So, let's start with a big question. What does happiness mean to you?
Oh, that's a big one, isn't it? For me, happiness is a bit more than just feeling good all the time. I think it's about balance. It's about living in alignment with what truly matters to you. It's the feeling of contentment that comes from being present and appreciating the small moments, like spending time with loved ones, or just enjoying a quiet morning. I don't think happiness is a permanent state, but rather something we can cultivate through daily choices.
I love that. Cultivate through daily choices. So, you don't see happiness as something you find one day and then it's just yours forever?
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea that happiness is a destination, like if I just achieve X or get to a certain point in my career, then I'll be happy. But happiness is more of a process. It's something we build by how we approach life, our relationships, and our own inner dialogue.
That makes sense. I think a lot of people believe happiness is just an emotional reaction. Like, when something good happens, we feel happy. But you're saying it's more of a mindset, a way of living?
Exactly. I think of happiness as something that's tied to our perspective. We all face challenges, but it's how we respond to those challenges that shapes our overall sense of happiness. It's about being able to find joy in the small things and finding meaning, even when life is difficult.
Right. So let's talk about the how of it. What are some things we can do every day to cultivate more happiness? Are there any practices or habits that you found helpful?
Absolutely. One of the first things I always recommend is gratitude. It's so simple, but it works. When you take time every day to reflect on what you're grateful for, even if it's just a few things, it shifts your focus from what's going wrong to what's going right. I try to write down 3 things I'm thankful for each day. It could be anything from a good conversation to a warm cup of tea. The small things really add up and make a big difference.
I love that. Gratitude has such a powerful impact, doesn't it? It's easy to forget, but it really does change how we see the world. Are there any other practices you incorporate into your routine?
Another practice I find really effective is mindfulness. Taking a few moments throughout the day to be present, to just breathe and check in with myself, helps me stay grounded. Life can be hectic, and it's easy to get caught up in the rush, but mindfulness allows us to slow down and appreciate the present moment. It's amazing how much peace you can find in just 5 minutes of focusing on your breath.
I totally agree. We get so caught up in the future or the past, but happiness seems to always live in the present. Now, I know a lot of people think about happiness as something tied to big achievements, like getting that promotion, buying a new house, or going on a dream vacation. But you're suggesting that happiness can also come from the small, everyday moments, right?
Yes, I think we've been conditioned to believe that happiness is something you earn, something you achieve, but that's not necessarily true. Those big moments can bring happiness, of course, but they're not the only source. I think we forget that happiness is often found in the mundane, in enjoying a conversation with a friend, in savoring your morning coffee, or in the simple act of going for a walk outside. When we learn to appreciate the little moments, we start to notice that happiness is actually all around us.
That's such an important point. It reminds me of something I read once, that we often miss out on happiness because we're so focused on future goals or comparing ourselves to others. But if we can learn to be present and embrace the current moment, we unlock a lot of joy.
Exactly. And speaking of comparison, that's another big happiness killer. Social media, for example, has made it so easy to compare our lives to everyone else's. We see highlight reels of other people's lives and think, if I had that, I'd be happy. But the truth is, happiness is about what we value, not what someone else is doing. It's about defining happiness for yourself.
Yes, the comparison trap is real. It's easy to look at other people's lives and think they've got it all together. But the reality is, we all have our own challenges. So I think what you're suggesting is really empowering. Happiness is something we can create based on our own values, not someone else's definition.
Absolutely. And that brings us to self-compassion, being kind to yourself, especially when you fall short or when things aren't going well. We're all so hard on ourselves sometimes, but I think happiness comes from accepting ourselves as we are. Instead of focusing on what's wrong, focus on what's right. And treat yourself with the same compassion that you'd offer a friend.
Such an important point. I think we often believe that self-criticism is what will drive us to improve, but in reality, it only holds us back. Self-compassion allows us to learn and grow without beating ourselves up.
Exactly. When you're compassionate with yourself, you're much more likely to take healthy steps forward. You're not paralyzed by shame or guilt. You're motivated by self-love and understanding.
So, to sum up, we've talked about a few key habits that can lead to greater happiness: practicing gratitude, being mindful, embracing the small moments, avoiding comparison, and being kind to ourselves. But before we wrap up, I'd love to hear from you. What's one small thing you do every day that brings you happiness?
For me, it's starting the day with a cup of tea and a few minutes of quiet reflection. I try to center myself before the day begins, just to check in and think about what I'm grateful for. It's a small ritual, but it sets a positive tone for the day ahead.
That sounds wonderful. For me, I try to end each day by reading something inspiring or listening to music that lifts me up. It helps me wind down and shift my mind to a place of calm and contentment.
It's so powerful to create those little rituals, isn't it? They anchor us in the present and remind us to slow down.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave our listeners with this. Happiness isn't a destination. It's something we cultivate every day through our thoughts, habits, and relationships. It's about being kind to ourselves, appreciating the small moments, and finding meaning in the everyday.
I couldn't agree more. Happiness is a practice, not a permanent state. We all have the power to create it, right here and now.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Patrick. This has been such a meaningful conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you all for listening to the Happiness Hour. I hope this episode has inspired you to cultivate more happiness in your life today. Remember, happiness isn't something you have to wait for. It's something you can create, one small choice at a time. Until next time, take care, stay happy, and be kind to yourself.